Hey guys, tonight we pull back the flap of a canvas tent, crouch low under the gunmetal sky, and step into a soldier's boots in the middle of World War II, not to storm a beach or dodge mortar fire, but to open a ration tin. You're cold, you're hungry, and what you're about to eat will either get you through the next march or send you hunting for a better deal in the black market by nightfall. Spoiler alert, you probably won't survive this culinary adventure with your taste buds intact. So, before you get comfortable, take a moment to like the video and subscribe, but only if you genuinely enjoy what I do here. And hey, let me know where you're tuning in from and what time it is where you are. Always love hearing how far across time zones these stories travel. Now, dim the lights. Maybe turn on a fan for that soft background hum, and let's ease into tonight's journey together. You crouch in the French countryside, boots soaked, uniform stiff with dried sweat, a steel helmet tugged low over your brow. In your gloved hands is a tin can olive green, dented and sealed tight. This, you're told, is dinner, or lunch, or breakfast. Time has become flexible. Hunger hasn't. This is your life now, the trench ration. During the early years of World War II, trench rations were often just a fancy name for canned meat, hard biscuits, powdered coffee, and occasionally, if you were very lucky, a tiny tin of processed cheese. Your knife prees open the can, and the scent hits you somewhere between dog food and rust. Welcome to your first main course, canned meat stew. It's greasy, salty, and suspiciously gelatinous. And yet, it's calories, and calories mean survival. The idea behind trench rations was simple: pack as many shelf-stable, high-energy foods into a small, portable format as possible. What that meant in practice was make it indestructible and hope the soldiers don't revolt. The meat was usually beef, sometimes pork, and often a mystery blend. Nutritional value was prioritized over flavor, and texture was an afterthought at best. Alongside your meat, you might get hardtack biscuits, thick, dry, and better suited for breaking windows than for eating. Soldiers often soaked them in coffee or water just to soften them up. You try to bite one dry. Immediate regret. Your molar might never forgive you. But not all was doom and biscuit dust. Occasionally, there'd be a slab of chocolate included, a morale booster disguised as dessert. Sugar was precious, and those tiny rectangles of dark, gritty chocolate became one of the few reliable joys in a soldier's day. Some even traded them like gold. Others stashed them away, saving them for the next moment of true despair. The trench ration wasn't a permanent solution. It was meant for short-term use, during the most intense periods of movement or combat, but short-term could stretch into weeks if supply lines faltered, and they often did. Rain, mud, enemy fire. None of it played nicely with logistics. Soldiers sometimes went days on half rations, or survived entirely on what they could scavenge or trade. Water, too, was no guarantee. Troops were issued purification tablets to treat whatever they managed to scoop from puddles or streams. The result? Cleanish water with a chemical tang that clung to your teeth and your morale. Powdered lemonade was later added to disguise the taste. Did it work? Not exactly, but it was yellow and vaguely citrusy, so it counted as effort. Historians still argue whether trench rations caused more complaints than comfort. On one hand, they were revolutionary in design: compact, calorically dense, and relatively safe to consume in harsh conditions. On the other hand, they made even the bravest men fantasize about army beans with actual flavour or dream wistfully of Mom's pot roast back home. And then there's the packaging. Soldiers often joked that the cans were harder to open than the bunkers they were trying to storm. Many carried special can openers, tiny metal keys called P38s, but even those failed under muddy, frozen fingers. Some resorted to smashing cans with rifle butts or stabbing them with bayonets. You try not to lose a thumb doing it. Again, quirky fact in particularly desperate moments. Some soldiers cooked their rations by placing the tin directly on the hood of a running jeep engine. Others balanced it on hot rifle barrels or dug tiny fire pits. Warm food, however vaguely flavoured, was always worth the effort. Even just the illusion of warmth helped. And yet, despite the complaints, despite the aching jaws and questionable meat, soldiers kept eating. They had to. The trench ration wasn't about pleasure. It was about not collapsing during a 10-mile march. It was about getting just enough energy to keep moving, keep fighting, keep hoping that somewhere down the line, a real mess tent might be waiting. You finish your meal, or at least the parts you can chew without dental regret. You tuck the empty tin into your pack, because littering's frowned upon, even in war. Your stomach still grumbles, but the edge is gone. For now, it's enough. Tonight, as you settle into the mud with your back against a tree and your rifle across your knees, you stare at the sky and think about food, not the food you just ate, but the kind you miss, the kind that's warm, fresh, real. But for now, canned meat and chalky coffee will have to do, because this is World War II, and what you eat isn't what you want, it's what you're given. You recall the moment you first encountered the notorious C-ration, a metal tin that promised to nourish you during long marches, yet delivered a flavour reminiscent of burnt rubber mixed with mystery meat. In the dim light of a makeshift canteen, with rain pelting the canvas overhead and mud caking your boots, you open the can with a groan. That sound like a can opener fighting a relentless battle echoes your inner despair. The C-ration was designed to be the perfect wartime meal compact, heavy on calories, and engineered to keep you moving even when every muscle in your body screams in protest. And yet, as you scrape through the questionable chunks and gelatin that looks like it might have been used as a late-night science experiment, you can't help but wonder who thought this was a good idea. The concept behind the C-ration was simple: provide the soldier with a chemically engineered meal that would last long, withstand the harshest conditions, and be easily stored in a soldier's pack. Your ration pack includes canned meat, a slice of hard biscuit, a small piece of cheese, and surprisingly, a piece of fruit candy. A little taste of sweetness in a world that otherwise offers nothing but grim sustenance. It's almost comical. The idea that between bites of rubbery meat and the occasional stab of cold coffee, a little piece of fruit candy could lift your spirits. Some of you traded that candy like it was pure gold. It's a moment of absurdity in the daily grind of combat. As you take your first bite of the meat, you notice that the taste is so mechanically bland that it seems to have been perfected in a laboratory, designed by men who had never seen a real farm. The meat is a dull, brownish substance that provides calories but no encouragement for your taste buds. It's no gourmet feast, it's just fuel. This culinary crime was never meant to delight. It was created to save lives in a war where every ounce of energy counted. The food was meant to be as enduring as it was unappetizing, a necessity rather than a treat. Every time you crack open a new tin, you battle with the can itself. The metal is tough, and the designated can opener a small and utilitarian tool known affectionately as the C-ration key often seems to have a mind of its own. You recall fellow soldiers trying everything from using pocket knives to smashing the can with blunt objects just to get to the meal inside. And when you finally do pry it open, you're greeted with a scent that's almost as forgotten as the taste of home. That scent is supposed to be the aroma of sustenance, but in reality, it's a reminder of everything that's missing: freshness, flavour, and even dignity. At one point, a sharp-tongued buddy of yours joked that these rations were so unappetizing that they could be used as chemical warfare against enemy morale. His dark humour lightens the mood for a moment, even as you all exchange wry smiles and shake your heads at the absurdity. Yet beneath the banter lies a shared understanding these cans are our lifeline, however bland they might be. It's a grim kind of comfort knowing that every soldier, no matter how far from home, is chewing through the same unremarkable meal. You know that behind this culinary disaster stands the military-industrial complex of wartime America. The designers of the C-ration were convinced that preserving energy mattered more than preserving taste. In the laboratory, scientists worked ceaselessly, mixing chemical stabilizers and preservatives to guarantee that the food would last for years on end without refrigeration. The goal was to create something that could endure shock, vibration, and prolonged storage. And while they succeeded in their primary mission, they left you with a meal that's as exciting as a lecture on protein denaturation. Historians still argue whether the sacrifice of taste was a necessary evil or a bureaucratic overreach in the name of expediency. Even though you gnaw on every bite like it might just be a new form of intelligence, there's a strange pride in your shared experience. In the worst moments of war, the C-ration becomes a symbol of perseverance, a token of the fact that despite hardship, you're still pushing forward. Even if the meat inside tastes like it was processed in a vacuum with little regard for human palates, it delivers a steady stream of energy enough to keep you marching down a muddy road toward an uncertain tomorrow. It may not be gourmet, but it's the morsel that keeps you and your mates alive when the world seems hell-bent on starving you of hope. Some days, when the cacophony of battle fades into a momentary lull, you find yourself almost nostalgic for these rations, not because they're delicious, but because they are a constant reminder that you're part of something larger, a brotherhood bound by shared sacrifice. You even remember the odd variety pack they once tried to introduce, featuring an experimental dessert can containing a form of chocolate paste. That trial was short-lived. The paste was so controversial it earned the nickname the chocolate casualty among your comrades. Light jokes like that are the only spice in an otherwise flavourless existence. They remind you that even in the bleak landscape of war, there's a spark of humour that can't be snuffed out. It is precisely these small absurdities that help break the monotony of endless marches and sleepless nights. As you sit quietly in a foxhole with your tin can open before you, you're aware of the paradox of it all. This food is barely edible, yet it sustains you. It embodies the contradiction of war, where the mundane becomes monumental, and a can of meat can mean the difference between life and death. Every bite is a gamble, a calculated risk that you swallow bravely, even as your taste buds protest in mute indignation. So you finish the last of your C-ration, setting aside the empty tin as if it were a trophy. It's a small insignificant victory in a landscape where every win is measured in degrees of survival. You push the memory of the flavour away and focus on the miles still to be marched, the firefights yet to be fought, and the distant promise of a meal that might actually remind you of home one day. As you clench your can opener, and gaze at the battlefield beyond mud, smoke, and the uncertainty of tomorrow, you can't help but think that these cans, these implacable messes of uniform sustenance, are a testament to the ugly ingenuity of war. They are far from the gourmet spreads of history books, but they are what soldiers ate. And perhaps in that bleak, unvarnished reality, there's a bitter kind of comfort in knowing that you're not alone in facing the absurdity of it all. The moment you lay eyes on your K-ration box, you already know it's going to be weird. It's small, rectangular, wrapped in olive drab cardboard, and looks more like it should contain bullets than breakfast. But you're hungry, and if the C-ration was any indication, your expectations are already buried somewhere in the mud beneath your boots. You sit down in a trench or maybe behind a truck wheel, the weight of your helmet tipping slightly forward, and you tear the box open with the same grim hope as opening a mystery gift from someone who barely knows you. The K-ration was designed for mobility, specifically for airborne troops and infantry, who had to carry everything on their backs. Developed in 1942 by Ansel Keys, the guy who also pushed the Mediterranean diet decades later, the K-ration aimed to provide balanced nutrition in a lightweight, portable format. Each box contained 3 meals: breakfast, dinner, and supper. They came in slim boxes that looked more like the packaging for model airplane parts than meals. You remember those labels well: B unit, D unit, and your personal favourite accessory packet, which sounds like it should come with a phone charger, not chewing gum and toilet paper. You pry open the breakfast box first. Inside a can of chopped ham and eggs. It's grey. It smells vaguely like fish, but insists it's pork. Next to it, a packet of dry crackers, a cube of processed cheese that somehow resists melting even in tropical heat, a tablet of bouillon soup mix, a packet of instant coffee, 4 tiny sugar cubes, and miraculously a piece of chewing gum. Some mornings, the gum is the best part. As you crunch into a cracker that's only slightly less durable than a roofing tile, you try not to think too hard about the ham. The eggs are chopped so finely they're basically a meat paste, but calories are calories. You need about 300-600 a day, and the K-ration tries to deliver it, sometimes just barely. For lunch, you dig into the dinner unit meat and beans. You brace yourself for more mystery textures and flavours that feel like they were invented during a bet. The beans taste vaguely metallic, the meat is more about protein than pleasure, and there's a chocolate bar so dense it could double as armour plating. It's called a D-ration bar, and it's infamous. Not for its sweetness, but for its ability to resist melting and shatter molars. Soldiers joked that it was more weapon than snack. You nibble cautiously, wondering if your dentist back home is getting a phantom pain. One of the quirkiest inclusions in the K-ration was the lemon powder. It came in a slim packet, meant to be mixed with water to disguise the taste of purification tablets. It didn't always dissolve. Sometimes it just floated on top like yellow sawdust. Still, it was a citrus-flavoured break from the relentless taste of meat and salt. The accessory packet is your small oasis. It includes a couple sheets of toilet paper, a matchbook, some chewing gum, a salt tablet, and a tiny 4-cigarette pack. Yes, 4. Because what else says you're still alive quite like a post-lunch smoke next to a bombed-out barn? But perhaps the most astonishing part of the K-ration is just how many soldiers found ways to personalise it. You'd swap the cheese for chocolate, trade extra cigarettes for real coffee, or hoard your gum like treasure. In some platoons, the lemon powder became a form of social currency. One guy made a joke about mixing it with shaving cream for a lemon meringue face mask. War does strange things to humour. Still, for all its eccentricities, the K-ration served a crucial purpose. It kept you going when fresh food wasn't an option. And in many ways, it marked a shift in military strategy. Food wasn't just about sustenance anymore. It was about portability, speed, and psychological warfare fighting hunger in ways that didn't involve campfires or mess halls. Historians still argue whether the K-ration was a nutritional success or a long-term disaster. Some say it led to vitamin deficiencies and digestive issues after extended use. Others defend it as a practical masterpiece of wartime logistics. The truth, as always, lies somewhere in the middle, maybe between the cheese cube and the gum. What you do remember is the monotony. K-rations offered variety in theory, but in practice, every box felt the same. You'd open one and guess, is this the one with the peanut bar, or the one with the death biscuit? Some guys joke that the packaging should have just said, "Surprise, it's beans again." And yet, there was comfort in that sameness. You could rely on it. In a world where bullets could fall from the sky and friends disappeared in the blink of an eye, a predictable can of ham and eggs became its own kind of security blanket. You sit now, K-ration in your lap, staring out across a silent stretch of field. The distant sound of artillery rumbles like an upset stomach. You unwrap the last piece of gum, pop it into your mouth, and chew slowly. Spearmint. For a second, you're not a soldier. You're just a guy chewing gum on a front porch somewhere back home. The moment passes. You pack up the scraps, fold the cardboard flat, and tuck the can opener back into your belt pouch. Your stomach is full enough. Your pockets are lighter. And tomorrow, there will be another K-ration waiting for you. Another box of weird calories and wartime creativity. And somehow, you'll eat it all again, because that's what soldiers do. The mess tent always smells like a promise hot food, maybe even real food, served on a tray instead of scraped from a can in the dark. You step through the flap with your mess kit in hand, half awake, boots dragging through mud that's starting to feel permanent. The line snakes ahead of you, soldiers mumbling their hopes, eggs, bacon, anything that isn't another tin of meat and beans. You move forward slowly, stomach grumbling louder than any orders barked across the yard. And then you see it, the chow line, a row of cooks in stained aprons, armed with ladles, spatulas, and a terrifyingly large knife that looks like it's seen more action than most lieutenants. This is the world of the field kitchen, or, more romantically, the company mess. While canned rations were the backbone of combat nutrition, mess tents were the soldiers' sacred oasis. Whenever the front lines paused long enough to allow it, mobile kitchens were rolled in, tents pitched, and hot meals began to flow like magic if magic involved powdered everything. Your tray clatters as the first scoop lands, powdered scrambled eggs. They look more like yellow spackle, and their flavour oscillates between foam rubber and kind of egg adjacent. You chew anyway. They're warm. That's enough. Next comes the spam, salty, pink, and oddly bouncy. Historians confirm that American troops consumed over 100 million pounds of it during the war. It was cheap, durable, and vaguely resembled meat. The troops had dozens of nicknames for it. Ham that didn't pass inspection, meatloaf's ugly cousin, or simply, again. Then there's the potatoes, mashed, powdered, reconstituted with water that may or may not have been fully boiled. The lumps are real, so is the comfort. Somehow, they stick to your ribs like home-cooked food, even if they taste more like school paste with salt. You pass the bread station, where a cook slaps a thick slice of white bread onto your tray, with the enthusiasm of a man who hasn't slept in 2 days. It's warm, fresh from a portable oven powered by diesel fumes and stubborn optimism. One bite in, you forget about the powdered lemonade, and then glory be a surprise dessert. Maybe it's a square of sheet cake, maybe a cookie, maybe a pale banana, spotted but edible. The mess sergeant shrugs when you ask how they managed it. Don't ask questions you don't want answers to, he mutters, but you smile anyway, because it's sweet, because it's not canned, because for the first time in a week, it tastes like someone tried. Mess halls and field kitchens did more than feed you. They brought structure, familiarity, a space where soldiers stood in line not for orders or ammo, but meatloaf and mashed potatoes. Here, food became more than fuel, it became ritual. The clang of metal trays, the scooping sound of ladles, the communal groans at Mystery Meat Mondays. You could pretend, just for a moment, that you were back in a school cafeteria just with more mud and fewer substitute teachers. The army didn't just care about calories, it cared about efficiency. The Quartermaster Corps coordinated food logistics on a scale that's hard to comprehend. Trains, trucks, boats, and men all moved in synchronized rhythm to keep those trays filled. They developed massive recipes for things like chili con carne or goulash that could be scaled to feed hundreds in a single batch. Some cooks had cheat sheets for turning powdered milk into pudding, powdered eggs into omelettes, and powdered failure into morale-boosting meals. Historians still argue whether the mess tent experience was genuinely restorative or just slightly better than starvation. Some say it bonded men in a way nothing else could. Others claim it led to mass gastrointestinal rebellion. One soldier wrote in his journal that the mashed peas alone could crush a man's will to live, yet quirky moments stuck with you, like the time a German POW assigned to kitchen duty baked an actual strudel from scratch, stunning everyone, or when a chaplain blessed the meatloaf, joking that it was as close to holy as anyone here was going to get. The field kitchen was full of surprises, good, bad, and somewhere in between. You finish your meal, tray scraped clean, and head to the wash station, where 2 barrels sit, one with boiling water, the other not. You dunk, rinse, and dry. The scent of coffee hangs in the air, burnt but somehow inviting. You walk away a little warmer, a little fuller, not just from the food, but from the ritual, the rhythm, the strange comfort of powdered eggs and instant pudding eaten under canvas. You know tomorrow you might be back to C-rations in a foxhole, but for tonight you had a tray, a table, and something that resembled a meal. And in a war like this, that's more than enough. Your boots squish through the wet grass of a temporary encampment, and the scent of something familiar drifts through the air. Burned bread, maybe, or boiled, something. You follow your nose, half hopeful, and arrive just in time to see a British soldier sitting cross-legged beside a tiny fire, hunched over a tin mess kit. He's humming softly and holding a dented enamel mug filled with what is unmistakably tea. Welcome to the British Army's dining experience, circa 1940s compact, resilient and powered by morale, biscuits, and an absolutely irrational amount of tea. You settle beside your Commonwealth comrade and peer at his rations. It's a tidy collection, tins and packets labelled with strict, understated confidence biscuit, brown, cheese, processed, tea, instant, and the occasional meat and vegetables, tinned, Everything is utilitarian. No branding and no slogans, just blunt nutritional negotiation. The centrepiece of any British soldier's food supply was the 24-hour ration pack, designed to keep a man going in the field for, you guessed it, 24 hours. It included a meat tin, biscuits, a bar of chocolate, usually dark and bitter, powdered milk, tea, sugar, and sometimes jam. The biscuits were dense, dry, and unapologetic. You bite one and wonder if your teeth will ever forgive you. They aren't meant to please, they're meant to survive a bomb blast and still deliver starch. But tea, that's where things get emotional. British soldiers didn't just drink tea, they ritualized it. Rain or shine, battle or break, if there was heat and a cup, tea would follow, even in the desert, even under fire. There's an unspoken reverence in the way they heat the water, stir the milk powder, drop in 2 spoonfuls of sugar, and inhale deeply before that first sip. You take a taste. It's not great, but it feels right. It feels like home. Interestingly, many British troops carried a personal stash of tea hidden in socks, tucked in boots, wrapped in spare cloth. One soldier allegedly kept a tin labelled first aid kit, which actually contained Darjeeling and a folding spoon. Priorities, after all. The British Army also leaned heavily on bully beef canned corned beef that came in trapezoidal tins and could be eaten hot, cold, or regrettably lukewarm. It was salty, fatty, and strangely durable. Combined with hard biscuits, it formed the foundation of many a field meal. When heated with onions or potatoes if available, it transformed into a sort of stew. Without those, it stayed stubbornly beefy. Another staple plum and apple jam, thick, sticky, and capable of disguising the taste of almost anything. Some soldiers even spread it on cheese biscuits just to mute the flavours colliding in their mouths. One journal entry described it as culinary ceasefire. Historians still argue whether British rations were superior to American ones. The Brits had better tea and more consistent menus. The Americans had more variety and candy bars. But the British took pride in the austerity of their meals, proof that a stiff upper lip didn't need condiments. There's also the infamous Compo Ration, short for Composite Ration Pack, issued to groups of troops and designed to feed 14 men for one day. It came in large crates and contained tins of sausages, vegetables, oatmeal, jam, margarine, and tea components. It was less about flavour and more about survival math. Still, soldiers got creative combining ingredients, sharing extras, even trading with Allied forces. A British soldier once swapped a tin of plum jam for a whole bar of American Hershey's chocolate. Both men considered it a win. You sip more tea and feel your shoulders relax. The fire crackles. The biscuit softens in your mouth. And for a moment, war seems like it's on pause. Food has that power. It's not about pleasure, it's about normalcy, reassurance. A reminder that even here, crouched in a muddy field with a rifle at your side, you're still a person, and the British Army knew it. Even in prisoner of war camps, tea was sacred. The Red Cross sent tea in relief parcels. Camp guards learned not to interfere. In one report, British POWs actually delayed an escape plan until after brew time. That's not madness, that's consistency. A few bites later, your stomach is no longer growling. The jam has done its job. The biscuit, somehow, hasn't cracked a tooth. And the tea lukewarm, overly sweet, mildly gritty, has wrapped its arms around your morale like a woolen blanket. You stand, brushing crumbs from your uniform, and nod to your British companion. He raises his mug in silent salute. Because in the trenches or the tropics, the one thing you can always count on is this: if there's tea, there's hope. You walk past a row of neatly stacked packs lined up like muted dominoes, and you spot a soldier kneeling beside his, carefully opening a wax paper wrapped bundle with the precision of someone either deeply reverent or deeply suspicious. His uniform's cut is sharp, and the insignia tells you he's part of the Wehrmacht. What he holds in his hands is something you've only heard about, the German Zerne portion, or Iron Ration. You ease down beside him. He glances at you and nods curtly, then pulls out a dense brick of dark bread and tightly wrapped sausage, slicing it with a field knife as if performing surgery. This is what German soldiers carried when everything else failed. The Iron Ration wasn't meant to taste good, it was designed for emergencies. When the field kitchens were gone, the supply lines were broken, and all you had left was what you could carry. The bread is pumpernickel dry, heavy, almost chewy. It's made with rye, sometimes ground so finely it's like eating compacted mulch, but it keeps forever. One bite and you understand why they call it iron. It's nourishing, sure, but it also could probably deflect a bullet. The sausage is Landjäger, a semi-dried meat stick made to survive the harshest climates without refrigeration. Spiced, salty, and smoky. It's like a primitive energy bar except with intestines. The flavour is strong, gamey, and unapologetic. It sticks to your teeth and reminds you with every chew that, yes, this is protein, and yes, this is survival. Also included a square of hardtack, similar to the British biscuit, though the German version sometimes included caraway seeds or a faint hint of anise, and if you're lucky, there might be a cube of bouillon, a concentrated beef or vegetable base that you could dissolve in hot water for a rudimentary soup. Not tasty, but warm, and that counts for a lot. You notice a tin tucked neatly in the soldier's kit. He opens it to reveal something truly surprising. Ersatz coffee, a chicory-based brew, often made with roasted barley, acorns, or even beets. The Germans, always industrious, used these coffee substitutes to stretch their dwindling supplies when blockades and shortages hit. You sip some. It tastes like slightly burned cereal, but it's hot, and it gives your stomach something to think about. Historians still argue whether German rations were superior in nutrition but inferior in morale. While they often had access to local food supplies, especially early in the war during occupation, their standard-issued meals were rigid, minimalistic, and depended heavily on discipline. Variety wasn't the goal, efficiency and predictability were. Yet some soldiers adapted creatively. In France, for example, troops often foraged, bought, or even confiscated cheese and wine from villages. In Russia, they bartered with locals for potatoes or eggs. Supplementation, as one officer called it. But the basic iron ration remained always in the bottom of a pack, ready for when everything else ran out. One quirky tidbit: soldiers were officially forbidden to eat their iron ration unless ordered to. It was so sacred, so final, that using it prematurely could result in punishment. You carried it for emergency only as if the battlefield wasn't emergency enough. A typical German field meal, when not on emergency rations, might include pea or lentil soup, thick and starchy, served from a field kitchen in battered metal containers. Bread and sausage remained staples, but so did sauerkraut, which provided a rare dose of vitamin C. In fact, the inclusion of sauerkraut in regular meals helped prevent scurvy. Yes, even in the 1940s, scurvy was still a lurking threat. The Wehrmacht also distributed ration booklets, not just for food, but for cigarettes, soap, and even shaving cream. Soldiers often marked them with complaints or sketches, a tiny protest against the monotony of cabbage and rye. One German soldier's diary noted, "Bread in the morning, bread at noon, bread at night if I survive this war. I'll never eat another slice again." Another wrote fondly about finding a boiled egg on Easter, smuggled by a chaplain from a nearby farm. It wasn't much, but in that moment, it tasted like resurrection. You take another bite of sausage and feel your jaw doing the heavy lifting. It's not gourmet, it's not comforting, but it works. Your stomach fills, your limbs feel less hollow, and your mind, surprisingly, sharpens. You look over at the soldier. He's already repacking his kit, folding each item precisely, slipping the knife back into its sheath, brushing breadcrumbs off his coat like they're secrets. There's no mess tent, no cook with a ladle, just this a knife, a brick of bread, and a strip of cured meat. But it's enough to keep going. You stand, shoulders stiff, and nod back at him. He gives you the ghost of a smirk and lights a thin cigarette rolled in brown paper. Smoke curls into the morning fog like an exhale from the war itself. The Iron Ration doesn't need to taste good. It only needs to last. The snow crunches beneath your boots, and the wind bites at the edges of your uniform as if trying to peel it away piece by piece. You're somewhere outside of Stalingrad, or maybe near Kursk. Your sense of place has been buried under ice and smoke. But your stomach is louder than the artillery now, and your fingers fumble through your coat in search of the humble miracle that fuels the Red Army kasha and salo. The Soviet soldier's diet is a study in minimalism, desperation, and the unexpected brilliance of making something from nearly nothing. You huddle near a dented steel pot that barely clings to warmth. Inside kasha, the ancient Slavic grain porridge made from buckwheat or barley. It's gluey, bland, and speckled with something white and glistening salo, or salted pork fat, unrendered, raw, and completely unapologetic. You stab at it with the tin spoon and shove a bite in your mouth before the wind steals its last shred of warmth. It slides down your throat like candle wax, but it's dense, caloric, and deeply, weirdly satisfying. The salo gives it body, a kind of greasy bravado, and the grain sticks to your ribs like cement. Soviet rations during World War II were dictated less by nutrition theory and more by availability. A soldier's daily ration was supposed to include black bread about 600 to 800 grams, a small portion of meat or fish, kasha, fat, usually salo, sugar, and tea or dried fruit if the supply chain hadn't frozen solid or been bombed into oblivion. But reality often stripped that list bare. You reach for your chunk of black bread, pulled from a coarse cloth pouch. It's dense, slightly sour, and sometimes speckled with sawdust, yes, actual sawdust. When flour supplies dwindled, mills were forced to stretch their batches, and sawdust, or sometimes pine bark, was used to bulk it out. Chewing it is part effort, part commitment, part dental risk. The tea is brewed in a battered aluminum mug, the colour of old brass buttons. It's a weak black tea, stronger than water, but only just. A single sugar cube dissolves into it like hope vanishing into history. Still, it's hot. You cup it in your hands and pretend that warmth might travel to your toes. Occasionally, the Red Army distributed vodka rations 100 grams per soldier on celebration days or after particularly horrific battles. Nicknamed Commissar's Courage, It numbed the cold and dulled the memories, though officers often hoarded it or traded it for boots, gloves, or favours. You once saw a man swap his entire day's rations for one shot of vodka. He said it was worth it. You weren't sure whether to envy him or not. Historians still argue whether Soviet food logistics were ingenious or haphazard chaos wrapped in frozen burlap. On one hand, they managed to feed millions of troops across vast ravaged terrain with barely functioning infrastructure. On the other hand, supply lines were often delayed, disorganised, or obliterated by enemy action. Some soldiers lived us weeks on crusts and boiled horse bones. One fringe tidbit Soviet troops in the Arctic sometimes received frozen seal meat, packed in ice and issued like meat popsicles. When cooked properly, it was rich in fat and vitamins. When not, it was a chewy, fishy disaster. Either way, you ate it. Hunger was not a negotiator. You glance at the soldier next to you. He's holding a chunk of dried fish, likely smelt or herring. It smells like the underside of a dock and looks like something you'd find behind a market stall, but he devours it with gusto, picking the bones with frozen fingers. Sometimes soldiers were issued tins of stewed meat, affectionately known as tushonka. The can opens with a metallic pop and reveals pale, greasy chunks floating in a greyish jelly, unappetizing. Yes, life-saving. Also, yes. Tushonka could be mixed with kasha, eaten with bread, or spread on crackers if you had any. One soldier, famously inventive, once heated tushonka by placing the can on the barrel of his Moulin Nagant rifle after 3 rapid shots. Practical, no, but it worked once. Another claimed to use the grease from the can to lubricate his boots. That worked twice, until the smell became unbearable. You take another bite of kesha and try not to think about tomorrow's meals, or lack thereof. In this moment, there's grain in your belly, heat in your hands, and salo slicking your throat with its unholy richness. You're not full, but you're not empty either. In wartime Russia, that's practically a feast. You stand, brush crumbs from your coat, and sling your rifle back over your shoulder. The wind howls like an old woman mourning the last bag of flour. You tighten your scarf and trudge forward. The next meal might be hours, or days, or a battlefield away. But for now, you've eaten, and that's enough to keep moving. The jungle air presses against your skin like a damp, invisible blanket. Mosquitoes hum in your ears. Somewhere nearby, a soldier curses softly as he wrestles with his gear. And you're trying to light a small stove while balancing a canteen, a metal mess tin, and what looks suspiciously like a melted brick of chocolate that's just survived a slow death in your pack. Welcome to the Pacific Theatre, where American GIs sweated, swatted, and squatted their way through some of the harshest conditions of the war, and where food became not just fuel, but a mental battleground of its own. Your meal tonight is a jungle ration, a special issue pack designed for tropical combat zones, developed out of necessity. The jungle ration tried to account for the sheer misery of the environment, the heat, the humidity, the terrain, and the inability to lug around heavy cans. This ration came in lightweight packages, mostly dehydrated components, and was meant to be divided into several meals. You tear open a brown wax paper envelope, and inside is something that resembles dried grass clippings. It's dehydrated soup mix vegetable, if you're lucky, barley if you're not. You boil water in your canteen cup, stir in the powder, and wait as it slowly rehydrates into a watery broth with floating flecks that may have once been carrots. It tastes like hope diluted by sweat. Alongside that, You've got dehydrated beef, which, upon reconstitution, has the texture of wet cardboard but the protein of an entire patrol. You chew and chew. It's bland, fibrous, and almost completely joyless, but hey, it's not meat and beans. The jungle ration also includes compressed cereal bars, hard candies, fruit bars, and biscuits so dry they could double as fire starters. You gnaw on one and feel your saliva evaporate in protest. You take a sip of lemon juice powder water to counteract the dryness. It tastes like a science experiment. You drink it anyway. One of the more infamous inclusions in these rations was the tropical chocolate bar. Unlike your typical Hershey's, this one was formulated not to melt even in 120 heat. The result? A dark brown rectangle with all the charm of a flavoured brick. It was so hard that some soldiers used it as currency, or simply discarded it entirely. One GI quipped that it was best eaten after a direct mortar hit softened it up. Quirky detail, the wrapper included instructions encouraging soldiers to eat the bar slowly, not for enjoyment, but because eating it too fast could cause digestive distress. It's the only chocolate I've ever been legally warned about, you think, as you take the tiniest bite possible. The jungle ration was a bold experiment, but it didn't last long. Supply chain issues, costs, and soldier complaints led to its replacement with the lighter, but less beloved K-ration in most cases. Still, for a brief time, it offered some variety and reduced the reliance on canned meat. But nothing, absolutely nothing, compared to the creative cooking methods soldiers invented here. With no mess tents, no ovens, and often no time, meals became exercises in field improvisation. One Marine famously cooked powdered eggs in his helmet using a Zippo lighter and a disgusted look. Another soaked crackers in rainwater overnight to make a kind of mushy porridge. He called it trench toast. No one asked for seconds. Historians still argue whether jungle rations were a leap forward in field nutrition or a logistical headache wrapped in paper. The ration was nutritionally balanced, provided more calories than the K-ration, and reduced pack weight significantly, but it required hot water to prepare, which wasn't always possible in combat, and it turned to mush if it got wet a near certainty in the jungle. You swat another mosquito from your neck and glance down at your plate, a puddle of soup, a chewed up biscuit, and a melting smear of fruit paste. It's not much, but it's enough. The soldier next to you offers a tin of Spam with a grin. He's managed to trade for it, smuggled it in, or hoarded it from an old shipment. You take a bite. It's salty, greasy, strangely nostalgic. In the middle of nowhere, it feels like Thanksgiving. For dessert, you dig into a fruit bar, compressed apple or pear, sweetened to near candy levels. It's the one thing in your ration that resembles a treat. The taste surprises you, real fruit, almost juicy. You chew slowly, carefully. It's gone too fast. The air hangs heavy. Nightfall presses in. You pack up your tin, douse the tiny fire, and lean back against your pack. Your stomach's not full, but it's no longer gnawing. That's the best case scenario in this theatre. As the jungle chorus begins, frogs, birds, the buzz of unseen things, you close your eyes and imagine fresh bread, real eggs, cold milk. You know it won't come, but still, you let the thought linger, because sometimes that's all you need to make it through the night. You're crouched beneath the open sky of North Africa now, boots half buried in dry, brittle sand, your mouth already dry before the sun has even hit its peak. Somewhere behind you, trucks rattle over stones, and the wind carries the scent of dust, oil, and something faintly edible. You peel open the day's ration, hoping for more than salt and disappointment. This is the desert, and this is what soldiers eat when nothing grows and everything sweats. Welcome to the North African campaign where heat warps your canteen cup, sand infiltrates every crevice of your gear and your food, and meals are measured in calories and patience. The rations here are often a hybrid of whatever was shipped in, whatever was scavenged, and whatever hadn't spoiled yet. The heat turns chocolate into soup, biscuits into kindling, and canned meat into a dare. Today's offering, a hybrid of British Compo rations and C-rations, the culinary version of an awkward handshake between allies. You pop open a tin of meat and vegetable hash. It glistens unnaturally in the sun, like it's sweating too. The scent is equal parts corned beef and canned regret. You take a bite and instantly reach for something, anything, to wash it down. Your water is warm. Of course it is. The canvas water bladder, or chagua, does its best to cool it. But out here in the Sahara, cool is just another broken promise. Still, you sip. You have to. Dehydration isn't just a threat, it's the main enemy after sundown. In this dry, scorching theatre of war, salt tablets are handed out like candy. You dissolve one under your tongue and try to ignore the taste, something between limestone and gym sock. It keeps you alive, they say. It also gives you heartburn that could level a tank. Your companion, a British tanker, offers you a hard biscuit. You break it open and find a single raisin inside, just one. He chuckles and calls it a bonus. You both chew in silence, the sun baking your helmets. He reaches into his rations and pulls out a tin labelled meat roll. It plops out with a wet slap, and for a brief moment, you both just look at it. Still, you eat, because that's what you do. There are also dehydrated soup packets, often lentil or pea, which require boiling water. You mix one up in your battered canteen cup and stir with the end of your bayonet, why not? The result is a pale green sludge that smells like army socks but goes down better than expected. One British report actually praised it as warming and sustaining. Another called it edible fog. One of the stranger quirks of desert rations is the tinned pudding, a dense block of sweetened flour, sometimes with flecks of dried fruit. It's greasy, oddly sweet, and slightly gritty from inevitable sand. Still, when the wind dies down and you have a quiet moment to yourself, even gritty pudding tastes like a distant memory of dessert. Historians still argue whether the logistical challenges of feeding troops in North Africa were ever truly solved. Between supply convoys being bombed, heat destroying perishables, and water sources being scarce or sabotaged, feeding the army became a feat of daily improvisation. The Germans fared no better. Rommel's Africa Corps often relied on Italian field kitchens or local looting. One account recalls German troops boiling camel meat with shoe leather for flavour. Desperate times. A fascinating tidbit. Some Allied soldiers in Egypt and Libya were issued date rations, dense blocks of pressed dates packed with vitamins and sugars, sticky, sweet, and extremely filling. They were a rare treat that also helped fight fatigue. Soldiers called them sugar bricks, and they'd hoard them like gold. You bite into one now, your only piece today. The sugars hit instantly, reviving your brain and briefly silencing the relentless gnaw of your stomach. You let the taste linger, even as it fuses your molars together. Food out here wasn't just about nutrition, it was about distraction, about endurance. Meals were stretched, shared, bartered. You'd trade cigarettes for pudding, socks for jam. One soldier supposedly gave away his helmet for a can of peaches. Whether that's true or not, the point remains: hunger rewrites your priorities. You finish your meal and wrap up the leftovers, mostly crumbs and wrappers slick with meat grease. You bury them in the sand, but not too deep. Jackals will dig them up anyway. You glance out over the horizon where the heat warps the air into ghostly mirages, and your stomach settles not satisfied, but stilled. The desert has a way of shrinking expectations. You stop wishing for steak. You start dreaming of ice water, or bread that doesn't crunch from sand, and every once in a while, maybe just once a week, you get something close to fresh food: an egg, a tomato, even a real cup of coffee brewed over a truck engine. But not today. Today, you chew your date brick and watch the sun retreat behind a dune. Tomorrow, you'll eat again. Probably. The fog rolls in off the channel as you huddle near a pile of crates marked with stencils: US Army, rations, Type B, and handle with care. The crates don't contain explosives, they're full of food, or at least something food adjacent. You're in England, late 1943, part of the build-up to the Normandy invasion, and you're about to be introduced to the infamous B-ration system, also known among the troops as the Big Batch Buffet. Unlike the individual soldier rations C, or jungle, the B-ration wasn't designed to fit in a pocket or pack. It was meant for field kitchens, to feed whole companies at a time. It was the army's version of just add cooks, and if you had a decent mess, sergeant with a creative streak, B-rations could actually taste. Okay, maybe. You walk into the makeshift kitchen tent, dodging dangling lanterns and clouds of steam. The cooks are elbow deep in large metal cans, shouting over the hiss of boiling water and the clatter of ladles. It smells like beef, onions, and something burnt, possibly hope. Today's menu: meat and spaghetti, made from reconstituted noodles and meat bits that arrive in gallon-sized tins. The spaghetti is gummy, the meat is vaguely cubed, and the sauce is so red it could be paint. You slide your tray down the line and receive a slop of it, steaming and glistening. You take a bite. It's salty, chewy, and actually not bad. You look up, startled. The cook grins. "Added a little Worcestershire," he says proudly, as though he just served you Parisian bolognese. The B-ration included over 100 components, issued in bulk to field kitchens. Think huge tins of stewed beef, dehydrated potato flakes, canned peas, powdered eggs, tomato paste, fruit cocktail, and those ever-present boxes of biscuits. Each box was labelled like a science experiment, complete with codes and portion sizes, allowing cooks to prepare meals for anywhere from 25 to 100 soldiers. You grab a cup of army coffee, dark, bitter, sludgy. It's made from instant coffee powder and boiled water stirred with a bayonet. It's not good, but it's coffee. And in wartime, coffee means civilization. Historians agree that caffeine may have fueled half the victories in Europe. Next to the coffee's pot sits a tray of scrambled powdered eggs, a breakfast staple that somehow made it to dinner. Rehydrated with water or milk, scrambled over a griddle, and seasoned if the cook had salt left. They wobbled like jello and smelled faintly metallic. A spoonful jiggles on your tray. You gulp it down and chase it with coffee before your brain can protest. B-rations weren't gourmet, but they were functional, and they allowed for cooking. That meant variety. Soldiers remember B-ration stews, omelettes, puddings, even cakes made from rehydrated flour and powdered sugar. A good mess team could whip up a passable cornbread or chili. A bad one could ruin soup with only 2 ingredients. One quirky inclusion: prunes. Canned, packed in syrup, and widely distributed for their effects. Some called them GI plumbing snakes. Others just avoided them entirely, claiming they could power a jeep if fermented. Another crowd favourite peanut butter, thick, oily, and served in tins that needed a hammer to open. Soldiers used it on bread, crackers, and sometimes directly on a spoon. It was protein, calories, and a taste of home. One GI claimed it cured his homesickness. Another claimed it glued his mouth shut during a briefing. Historians still argue whether the B-ration system was more democratic than delicious. It gave every soldier, regardless of rank, access to the same menu. Some say it improved morale, others suggest it simply lowered expectations. You finish your spaghetti and eggs, yes, together and scrape the remnants into the waste bin. A sign above it reads, "Take all you want, eat all you take." That slogan's been repeated so often it feels like scripture. And honestly, it's not bad advice. You help clean your tray and glance around the tent. Outside, the sky's darkening. Inside, the warm yellow light of the cook stoves throws long shadows on the canvas walls. There's laughter, a harmonica playing softly in the corner, and the smell of apple cobbler, someone's attempt at dessert with reconstituted fruit and biscuit dough. You grab a bowl, it's hot, sweet, and shockingly edible. You take slow bites, savouring the cinnamon, letting your mind drift home. Letters, the sea crossing still ahead. Tomorrow, it'll be powdered soup and beef hash. Maybe the next day too. But tonight, you got dessert. And for just one moment, the war feels a little less hungry. Your boots land with a squish in the soft, rain-soaked fields of Normandy. The hedgerows stretch like tangled green walls, hiding everything: Germans, mines, even your own thoughts. You haven't eaten in a day and a half, unless you count that half-soggy cracker you found stuck in your ammo pouch. Now, behind the front lines, a resupply finally comes in. You're handed a small, wax-coated cardboard box. Familiar, dreaded. Welcome to the K-ration. You slide to the ground, rip it open, and stare into the Spartan contents like a man on a blind date with disappointment. Inside, a tin of meat spread, 4 crackers, a packet of powdered lemon drink, 2 sugar cubes, a stick of gum, a cigarette, and a bar of technically chocolate, though you'd never accuse it of flavouring court. The K-ration was born from innovation, developed for paratroopers and mobile units. It was meant to sustain a soldier for short-term missions 24 hours, tops. But reality doesn't care about intended use, and you've been living on these boxes for 3 days now. The breakfast unit includes dry biscuits, crackers, a small tin of canned ham and eggs the consistency of cold toothpaste, and a fruit bar that tastes like condensed cough syrup. There's also powdered coffee and, if luck is on your side, a single sheet of toilet paper tucked neatly beside a matchbook. Thoughtful, if grimly ironic. You rip open the meat spread tin, it hisses slightly. The sound of preserved anxiety, and scoop a bit onto a cracker. It crumbles instantly. The meat's texture is part cat food, part sadness. You chew slowly, wondering how many culinary crimes were committed in this war. But calories are calories. The dinner unit isn't much better. A tin of cheese or chopped meat, a few more crackers, and a D-bar, a high-calorie chocolate bar so dense it doubles as a blunt weapon. Soldiers joked it could stop bullets or teeth. You take a bite and immediately regret it. It has the flavour of bark and the meltability of steel wool. Still, it's something. You take another bite, you chew, you swallow, and somehow you go on. K-rations had 3 meal types: breakfast, dinner, and supper, each with slight variations. Sometimes you'd get tinned sausages, which were basically pink tubes floating in brine. Other times, cheese spread, which looked like glue and tasted like foot. Then there was the powdered lemon drink, a desperate attempt at hydration with the zest of battery acid. You mix it up in your canteen cup and sip. Your lips pucker, you sigh, you drink the rest. Historians still argue whether the K-ration was genius or disaster. It was compact, lightweight, and packed with roughly 3,000 calories across all 3 boxes. But soldiers in prolonged combat, especially in the hedgerows of France or the mountains of Italy, were never meant to eat it for weeks on end. Malnutrition, weight loss, and digestive issues became common. One infantryman joked that after 5 days of K-rations, you could use your stomach as a helmet. But there were quirks too. Each box included a stick of gum, usually spearmint or juicy fruit. It was a morale booster, a dental aid, and sometimes a currency. Cigarettes. 2 or 3 per box served the same triple function. You light one now, the paper crackling as the smoke curls upward, chasing away the stench of meat paste. Some K-ration boxes came with a note or quote, printed on the inside flap, a line from Lincoln, Roosevelt, or some long-dead general. Soldiers would collect them, share them, even scribble sarcastic responses underneath. One box read, "Your country depends on you." Someone had added, "To survive this cheese." You glance around. Other GIs are doing the same thing, nibbling, smoking, shaking their canteen cups like dice. The ritual of eating has become a strange kind of comfort, a moment to sit, even in the mud, a moment to chew, even if it's cardboard. A moment to remember you're human. You finish your ration and stuff the wrappers back in the box. Nothing gets left behind, not here, not in this mess. You fold the cardboard flat and tuck it into your pack. It's not heavy, but it carries the weight of days and weeks of sameness. The same meat spread, the same gum, the same tired joke about the D-bar being harder than your helmet. But somehow, it works. You stand, fueled not by flavour, but by function. There's still gunfire in the distance. The hedgerows still loom, but you've eaten. You're upright, and for now, that's enough. The snow crunches beneath your boots again, but this time, it's not Europe. You're in the Korean peninsula now, and the winter wind doesn't just bite, it gnaws. Your breath comes out in thick clouds, and your fingers are too numb to feel the can opener in your hand. You fumble with the latch on a green tin, and finally pry it open to reveal the familiar, questionable promise of a C-ration. It's 1951, and you're with U.S. Troops dug into frozen hillsides and trenches, trying to survive not only bullets, but the bone-breaking cold. And the C-ration first issued in World War II has come back for a sequel, only now. It's met the icy fury of Korean winters, where heating your food is more luxury than standard. You open the can and stare at the contents: beans and frankfurters, affectionately known as beanie weenies. A gelatinous film coats the surface, congealed fat from a meal that was never meant to be seen cold. You knock it against your helmet a few times just to loosen it up. The beans smell decent, the franks, not so much. You take a bite. It's salty, chewy, vaguely comforting. It tastes like the memory of a campfire cookout that someone described to you once. The full C-ration consisted of several components: AM unit the entree, a B unit bread and dessert, and an accessory pack. The M units came in tins, meat and beans, meat and spaghetti, chopped ham and eggs, or the infamous ham and lima beans, aka ham and mofos. That's not a joke you tell your mum, but it is one every soldier knows. The B unit came with hard biscuits, a tin of fruit or pudding, and a candy bar, usually Tootsie Rolls, charms, or a chocolate brick of debatable origin. The fruit cocktail, if present, was the crown jewel. It was sweet, moist, and full of texture and oasis in a desert of dense, salty mush. You dig into one now, and it almost brings tears to your eyes. Almost. The accessory packet is its own treasure chest: chewing gum, matches, a mini roll of toilet paper, instant coffee, sugar, salt, and if you're lucky, a tiny pack of 4 cigarettes. You light one with shaking hands and hold the smoke deep in your lungs like it might warm your core from the inside out. There's a small pouch of creamer, powdered and suspiciously long-lived. Mixed with your coffee, it creates something approximating warmth and taste. If you're desperate, it can be snorted for the illusion of flavour. One guy in your platoon swore it gave him dreams of milkshakes. You try to heat your food by tucking the can against the engine block of a jeep. The result is lukewarm on one side, still icy on the other. You don't care. You chew. You swallow. You live. Historians still argue whether the C-ration was an improvement or just a bureaucratic retread. It offered variety more than the K-ration, but came with weight, bulk, and often led to digestive trench warfare. Soldiers joked that you could build a foxhole with the cans, and many did, stacking them like bricks in moments of inspired desperation. A fringe tidbit. During the Chosin Reservoir campaign, where temperatures dropped below 30 degrees and frozen C-ration cans had to be thawed by body heat. Soldiers would sleep with them tucked under armpits or between thighs, making dinner time an awkward affair of warmth and bravery. You gnaw on a hard biscuit, wondering how it's both crumbly and solid as granite. Spread some cheese product on it, a neon orange paste with the consistency of putty. It's salty, rubbery, and vaguely dairy-like. A guy next to you uses it to repair a hole in his boot. You laugh. He shrugs. Still works. You finish your meal and stare into the can. It's greasy and empty now, like so many days here. The cold wind blows again, and you press the lid back on, wiping your hands on your coat. There's no trash here. Just recycling your can might become a stove, a shovel, or a cut by tomorrow. You lean back against the trench wall. The snowflakes are gentler now, falling like confetti in slow motion. You feel full, not satisfied, not delighted, just full, and that's enough. Because food here isn't about pleasure, it's about purpose. And tonight, purpose tastes like lukewarm beans, cold pudding, and the ghost of a cigarette. The boots you wear now are caked in jungle muck again, but this time it's not World War II, it's Vietnam. The year is 1968, and the air is thick with a kind of humidity that makes your clothes feel like wet towels strapped to your skin. The scent of gunpowder lingers in the leaves, and somewhere in the trees above, cicadas scream like malfunctioning smoke alarms. But all you can think about is the green tin clutched in your hand, another meal, combat, individual, another C-ration. Yep, they're still around, updated a little, repackaged a bit, but essentially the same familiar friend, heavy, clunky, and bursting with flavourless reliability, you sit down under a tree, wipe your hands on your pants and start peeling open the cans. The main entree today is turkey loaf with gravy, a meal that sounds more festive than it looks. You stare at the contents. It's beige, it's jiggling, and it's dense. You poke it with your spoon and it doesn't fight back, which is honestly kind of comforting. You take a bite. It's salty, warmish, thanks to a brief stint next to a Zippo lighter, and tastes vaguely like school cafeteria, Thanksgiving if the cafeteria had a rat problem and no windows. Alongside the turkey loaf comes the usual B-unit dry crackers, fruit jam, a cookie, and powdered drink mix. You break a cracker and spread some apple jelly on it. The jelly is bright, sweet, and oddly joyful in contrast to the stale cracker. For a moment, it actually feels like dessert. Then comes the peanut butter tin. You pop it open and scoop out the oily stiff contents. It smells just right. And for a second, it transports you maybe to your childhood kitchen, maybe to a memory that never really happened. You eat it slowly, in silence. Every bite is sticky and sacred. The Vietnam-era C-rations had evolved slightly from their WWII's predecessors. Menus were more varied 12 entrees instead of 6. There were also different candies now. Tootsie Rolls still made appearances, but now you might find chocolate discs, hard mints, or even coconut bars. And each accessory pack came with gum, matches, salt, sugar, toilet paper, and, of course, 4 cigarettes still unfiltered, still rolled tight in brown paper. The smell of one being lit is as common as sweat and rifle grease. You strike a match, light yours, and let the smoke settle into your lungs like a second breath. Around you, other soldiers are doing the same, eating in silence, occasionally trading cans. You want my ham and lima beans, only if you want my liver cheese. Laughter bubbles up. Brief, honest, then fades again. Historians still argue whether the updated C-rations improved morale or just sustained the myth of nutrition. On paper, they were balanced calories, fats, protein, but in practice, monotony eroded the soul. Troops would go to astonishing lengths to vary their diet, mixing peanut butter with cocoa powder to make field fudge, frying crackers in bacon grease, or boiling coffee over spent shell casings. Here's a quirky one for you. Some soldiers used fruit cocktail syrup as hair gel. Others would bet their cookies in card games or use cheese spread to write messages on ammo crates. When food becomes boring, it becomes currency, and creativity becomes survival. You reach for your powdered orange drink, pour it into your canteen cup, stir with your spoon. It fizzes faintly. You sip. It's tangy, almost refreshing, and reminds you of childhood orange soda without the fun. The one every soldier dreads opens with a dull hiss. Ham and lima beans. You can smell it from across the clearing. One guy opens it, groans, and promptly buries it like a time capsule of despair. You all nod in understanding. Some cans are better left untouched. As the light begins to dim and the jungle shifts its tone to something darker, you repack the empty tins. Metal clinks on metal. The sound echoes just a little too loudly. You think about food not in the gourmet sense, but in the primal, elemental sense. You think about hot bread, cold milk, anything fresh, but also, strangely, you appreciate what's in front of you. This ration may be bland, may be repetitive, may even be borderline offensive, but it's warm. It's here. It's calories in the middle of a war. You wrap your hands round the cup of orange drink like it's something sacred. Close your eyes for a second and let the moment stretch out like taffy in the humid air. You've eaten. You're not hungry. You're still here. You're leaning against the dusty wall of a half-collapsed farmhouse somewhere in northern France. Your rifle rests on your lap, your helmet's off, and your stomach's growling again. But this time, there's no tin of beans, no jelly packet, no coffee powder in sight. You're not unarmed though. You've got your real weapon now, a bar of chocolate and a flawless poker face. This, soldier, is where the unofficial art of trading and bartering becomes more vital than your mess kit. Because out here, meals don't always come in rations, they come in deals, trades, and the black market whispers that hum beneath every base camp and bombed out village. You pull a pack of cigarettes from your breast pocket. They're still fresh, uncrushed, maybe even a bit aromatic. Gold, in other words. A passing British private glances over and raises an eyebrow. "I'll trade you 2 tins of steak and kidney for that pack," he says. You pause, pretend to consider, then nod. A handshake later, you're holding dinner. That's how it works. In every theatre of the war, from the beaches of Normandy to the jungles of Burma, soldiers turned into negotiators. Chocolate, coffee, tobacco, and canned fruit became unofficial currencies. If you had extras or something rare, you held the power of morale itself. And if you were hungry enough, you'd swap a clean pair of socks for a crust of bread without blinking. And let's not forget the locals. You wander through a French village and see a woman selling eggs from a wicker basket. You speak no French. She speaks no English. But a bar of Hershey's chocolate, unwrapped just enough to glint in the sunlight, does the talking for you. Moments later, you've got 2 eggs, still warm. Real food. You'll eat them fried, boiled, or raw if you have to. You grin. Victory tastes like this. Of course, it wasn't all smiles. Some soldiers slipped into darker trades, looted goods, stolen rations, even black market meat from suspect sources. A guy in your unit once found a whole ham behind a German barn. No one asked questions. No one wanted to know if it had a name. You remember watching a group of American GIs trade canned peaches with some Canadians for a working radio. The Canadians threw in a box of crackers just for the syrup. That's the kind of commodity fruit cocktail had become. Liquid gold. Historians still argue whether these trades disrupted military logistics or kept morale alive. Officially, bartering was frowned upon. Unofficially, everyone knew it was survival. The army fed you, sure, but your friends fed you better. Some even went entrepreneurial. A young corporal from Chicago built a whole side hustle out of melted chocolate bars, which he poured into molds shaped like grenades and sold as souvenirs. Another guy traded instant coffee for boot polish, then flipped the polish for socks, and finally for an entire roast chicken. No one knows how he did it. Everyone remembers that he did. Then there were the desperation trades. One night in Italy, you remember swapping half your cigarette pack for a single piece of real bread course. Dark, crusty. You shared it with 2 other guys, each taking careful bites, trying not to finish too fast. No one talked. No one needed to. That was communion. A quirky tidbit. Some Red Army troops reportedly used vodka rations to barter with American soldiers for canned meat. Meanwhile, British troops hoarded their tea supplies like precious gems, sometimes refusing to part with a single bag unless bribed with American soap or razor blades. Back in camp, the barter boards form guys laying out their unwanted rations like a garage sale. Beef and beans for cheese spread, 1 fruit bar for peanut butter. No, I'm not taking ham and lemurs. What am I? Desperate. Someone offers up 2 cans of mystery meat, He ends up going home with crackers and a can of fruit. Everyone wins. Sort of. One soldier builds a menu on a scrap of cardboard, offering items at fixed rates. Cigarettes, 1 per jam tin. Coffee 2 for fruit cocktail. Socks, only if clean. You step back from the crowd, cradling your newly traded dinner, some stew, a hard biscuit, an actual chocolate bar that hasn't melted. You've bartered like a champ today. The sun's going down. Smoke rises from nearby fires, and laughter echoes across the makeshift camp. There's no mess hall, no silverware, no guarantee of another meal. But for tonight you've got something hot, something sweet, and the warm feeling of a well-earned trade. And out here, that makes you rich. The snow is falling again, this time softer, gentler than gunfire, at least. You're back in Europe. Late 1944, the Ardennes maybe, or somewhere along the Siegfried Line. You've just peeled open a can of beef stew and scarfed it down in the dim glow of a helmet lantern. But tonight isn't about calories, it's about morale. And this stew, this salty, lukewarm, probably 3-month-old stew, it's holding your spirit together. It's strange, the way food morphs into something symbolic during war. It's no longer just about hunger. It's a reminder of safety, normalcy, even joy. A hot meal in the right moment can feel like armour, like a hand on your shoulder. You've watched grown men tear up over lukewarm oatmeal. You've seen entire squads fall silent at the sight of birthday cake shipped from home. That's right, birthday cake. It comes in a tin, usually dry and crumbly, but it's covered in frosting that somehow didn't melt or mould. One guy in your unit got one last week. His mum had sent it from Ohio. He opened it slowly, reverently, like it was a holy artifact. You all shared it 1 crumb at a time. That was dinner. That was magic. And then there's coffee. Real coffee. Not the instant stuff, but fresh grounds smuggled from an officer's stash or traded for with a field nurse. Someone builds a fire in a shell casing, another guy finds an old French pot, and before long there's a bubbling pot of bitter, beautiful morale-saving coffee. You drink it like it's liquid gold. You hold the cup in both hands just to feel the warmth. You close your eyes and sip. There's a reason the Red Cross trucks brought donuts and hot chocolate to forward camps. It wasn't nutrition, it was therapy. Soldiers lined up not just for the sugar, but for the feeling. Someone handing you a warm drink and saying, "You're doing okay." Sometimes that's all you need to keep going. Historians still argue whether food had a greater impact on morale than letters from home. Some say it's equal, others insist a slice of fruitcake beats a heartfelt paragraph when you've been shot at all day. One thing's for sure, nobody writes home saying, "I'm fine, but I'd trade this photo for a meatloaf." Even the canteen treats became morale anchors. The occasional ration of ice cream powder, yes. It existed, could be stirred into snow and passed around like contraband happiness. There were even reports of soldiers mixing chocolate bars with hot water to create something resembling cocoa. It was gritty, thin, and often burnt, but it was still cocoa. Then there's the ritual of food. The way you all gather muddy, blooded, bone-tired, and somehow still manage to crack jokes about the taste of beef hash, or the possible origin of the mystery meat in can number 4. Humour binds. A bad meal becomes a shared experience. A good one becomes a legend. Quirky fact. Some units developed rating systems for meals. 5-star stew, 2-star ham, 0-star lemurs. The ham and lima beans combo, long despised, eventually became a bonding force because everyone hated it. There's power in shared misery. especially when it comes in a can. You remember one Christmas in the field, a chaplain managed to organise a proper dinner. Roast chicken, stuffing, even cranberry sauce. It was cold, it was rushed, and it was eaten sitting on crates. But for those 20 minutes, you weren't in a war. You were home. And on rare occasions, just rare enough to keep the dream alive, you got a Red Cross parcel. Cheese, chocolate, maybe a tin of peaches, maybe even Spam, the prized jewel of Allied cuisine. You divided it like treasure, and somehow even the Spam tasted like filet mignon when shared in a foxhole. You watch your buddy unwrap a tin of peaches now. He grins like it's Christmas, offers you a spoonful. You take it. It's syrupy, sweet, and slightly metallic. You close your eyes. For a second, your mouth forgets about powdered eggs and cold coffee. Sometimes the morale boost came not from food itself, but from preparing it. A warm mess kit, a shared cook pot, that smell of something vaguely edible simmering over a makeshift stove. It draws men like moths, conversation sparks, songs are hummed. War retreats to the edges, if only for a moment, because food isn't just fuel. Out here, it's resistance against the cold, the fear, the exhaustion, against giving up. You finish your stew, wipe the spoon on your sleeve, and lean back against the stone wall. Somewhere in the dark, someone's humming a Christmas carol. You smile. The taste of beef and broth still lingers in your mouth. It wasn't a great meal, but it was the best meal of the week, and for tonight that's enough to keep going. The wire gate creaks shut behind you, and the guards don't say a word. Their eyes speak enough tired, cold, and barely human anymore. You're inside now, a prisoner of war. Your uniform's still intact, your boots still holding, but inside you're hollowed out. Not from fear, not yet. From hunger. POW camps varied wildly depending on who ran them. For some, like the better organised Allied-run camps, food was poor but edible. For others, especially in the Eastern Front or the Pacific, the meals were barely enough to keep the heart ticking. You glance at your first tray, if it could even be called that, a tin cup of watery barley soup, thin enough to see the bottom, a slab of black rye bread, the size of your palm and hard at the edges. That's it. You stare at it, and your stomach actually growls louder than you thought possible. This is your life now. You sit cross-legged on a cold wooden floor and start sipping the soup. It tastes of salt, maybe boiled cabbage, but mostly just water and memory. The bread is dry, coarse, and almost bitter. Still, it has weight. You chew slowly, make it last. There won't be seconds. In German POW camps, especially stalags holding Allied troops, rations were often regulated but meagre bread, margarine, jam, a rotating soup. Red Cross parcels were your salvation when they arrived. Packed with biscuits, canned meat, cigarettes, even chocolate. They were shared among barrack mates like communion wafers. You remember the first time one arrived, how everyone stood taller, joked more, even slept better that night. But when they didn't arrive, you were back to black bread and soup, and nothing else. Historians still argue whether the Geneva Conventions were honoured consistently across POW camps. They weren't. In Japanese camps, Allied prisoners were often fed boiled rice 3 times a day, sometimes with pickled radish, rarely with protein. Malnutrition was rampant, dysentery common. A single sweet potato peel became a coveted luxury. You lie awake one night and overhear a man whispering his favourite recipe from back home: meatloaf with onions, mashed potatoes with gravy, apple pie still warm from the oven. His voice trembles by the end. He doesn't cry. He just rolls over, and silence returns. One quirky fact in some British-run POW camps: guards and prisoners played cricket together on Sundays, and the mess would serve tinned salmon or scrambled powdered eggs as a treat. These moments, rare as they were, became anchor points of sanity. In contrast, in Russian captivity, German POWs often survived on potato peels, turnip soup, or raw cabbage. There were even rumours still debated of prisoners boiling old boots to extract any lingering nutrients from the leather. Desperation turns you into a scientist, a chef, and sometimes an animal. You glance down at your hands, thinner than before, your belt cinched tighter. You're shrinking. But still, you eat. One time, a fellow prisoner trades a button for a crust of bread. Another offers up a photograph of his family for 2 spoonfuls of beans. No one blinks. These are fair trades now. Then there's the invisible economy, the bartering system inside the camp. Cigarettes are top-tier currency, canned milk gold. Even salt can go for a week's worth of favours. You learn to count your spoons, to guard your rations like secrets. Sometimes someone sings, sometimes someone faints, but every once in a while someone cooks. You remember one prisoner who fashioned a tiny stove out of scrap metal and boiled tea using herbs picked outside the fences. The brew was bitter, but it was hot. You all passed it around, sipping from a single chipped mug. The warmth spread through your chest like something holy. Another time, a parcel arrived with chocolate pudding real, actual pudding. It was hoarded, portioned, and consumed in reverent silence. One man offered his share to a sick bunkmate. That man didn't make it, but he smiled after eating. These moments stay with you. You eat because you have to, but you share because it's what makes you human, and you're holding on to that tight. Tonight, your dinner is half a loaf of bread and a spoonful of stew thickened with flour someone smuggled from the kitchen. You chew slowly, let the warmth last. You're not full, but you're alive, and that's the point. The war is over, at least. That's what they say. But you still feel it in your knees, your back, the way you flinch when doors slam. And tonight, you feel it in your stomach because tonight, for the first time in years, you're eating not out of necessity, not from a tin, not under fire, but from a plate, with silverware, at a table. You're sitting in a mess tent set up for celebration. The long tables are covered with white cloths, well, whitish, and someone's even managed to find a few candles. There's laughter in the air, the kind that doesn't sound borrowed from someone else's throat. The war is done, the peace is uneasy, but right now it's feast time. You lift your fork and dive into a slice of roast beef, steaming, juicy, and so rich it feels like a sin. It's not perfect, cooked in bulk and seasoned with ambition more than skill, but it melts in your mouth compared to what you've known. You chew slowly, eyes closed, letting your taste buds remember what joy feels like. Beside you, a corporal bites into a piece of buttered bread, tears welling up. "Real butter," he says, almost disbelieving. "Not margarine, not spread, butter." You both laugh. You both cry a little. It's fine. No one's pretending to be tough tonight. On your tray, mashed potatoes with gravy, a dollop of green peas that aren't grey or powdered, a slice of apple pie that still tastes faintly of cinnamon. Someone opens a bottle of champagne liberated, no doubt, from a German officer's villa, and you all pass it around, drinking straight from the neck. Etiquette be damned. Food, tonight, is more than food. It's proof you made it. And yet, beneath the warmth and the gravy, something quieter lingers, a kind of guilt, because not everyone's at this table. Some of the chairs are empty, some of the voices are missing. You clink your fork against your plate and look around. Everyone feels it. No one says it. The feast continues. Someone plays a harmonica in the background. A few brave souls dance between the tables. Even the officers smile tonight. Historians still argue whether these victory feasts were a turning point for morale, or just a brief pause before soldiers re-entered civilian life. What's certain is that every army tried. British troops served roast lamb and plum pudding. The Americans cooked up turkey and stuffing, even in the Pacific. The Soviets, known for their scarcity, broke out hidden vodka and toasted to survival. Quirky detail in Italy. A group of Allied soldiers reportedly celebrated the end of fighting by roasting a whole ox and sharing it with local villagers, who provided wine and tomatoes in return. They danced together, barefoot, for hours. Here, now, you raise a spoonful of ice cream made with real milk, real sugar, served in a tin bowl. It's starting to melt. You savour it. Cold, creamy, perfect. You think back to the rations, the trades, the powdered this and dehydrated that. You think about the canned fruit cocktail that once made you weep. You think about how this moment feels both alien and familiar. One soldier stands up, cup in hand. He clears his throat and says, "To the ones who didn't get to taste this." Everyone lifts their drinks, quietly, with reverence. The silence that follows says more than words could. You finish your meal and lean back. The candle flickers. The music continues. For the first time in years, you're full not just your belly but your heart. You're full of warmth, of memory, of absence, of presence. You gather your tray, set it aside, and step out into the night air. It's cool, but not biting. Stars above, a breeze through the trees. You survived, and tonight you feasted. You're home now, not on a battlefield, not in a tent or foxhole, but in a kitchen that smells faintly of cinnamon and soap. The floorboards creak, the kettle whistles, and the fridge hums softly in the corner, like it never knew there was a war. And yet, every time you open a can of beans or see a square of chocolate, your body flinches in recognition, because after years of powdered eggs and meat in tins, even civilian food feels foreign. You sit at the breakfast table, staring down at a plate of eggs, scrambled just right. Real eggs, farm fresh. The yolks are bright and buttery, the texture cloud soft. You take a bite and immediately feel overwhelmed. Not because it tastes bad, far from it, but because it tastes like nothing you've had since the war started. It's not just food, it's a memory trying to bloom in your mouth. Across the table, your mother, or maybe your wife, asks if you want more toast. You nod. Say yes, but your eyes are distant. In your head, you're still rationing, still counting crackers and dividing candy bars among men with hollow cheeks. Rationing doesn't end when the war does. Not really. Back in the States or in London or Paris, ration books are still a reality. Butter, sugar, meat. They're all still hard to come by in 1946. Civilian life doesn't just snap back to full plates and full bellies, it eases there, slowly. And for returning soldiers, that slow ease can feel like whiplash. You walk into a grocery store and stop dead at the shelves. So much colour, so much packaging. You stare at a row of breakfast cereals and nearly forget how to choose. In a war zone, your choices were meat or more meat. Here it's cornflakes or oat puffs or 1,000 boxes promising the American dream. Historians still argue whether post-war food abundance dulled the nation's memory of what war was really like. Some say it helped people heal. Others say it buried the trauma beneath layers of white bread and apple pie. You help yourself to a slice of that pie later warm. Flaky. Real apples. It tastes too good. You almost feel guilty, like enjoying it too much would be disrespectful to the guys who never got this chance. The guys who died with K-ration bars in their pockets and powdered coffee in their kits. And yet, there's joy here too. You open the pantry and find a jar of peanut butter smooth, creamy, and not the separated sludge from your C-ration days. You spread it on toast, and as you chew, you realise something strange. This is comfort, not survival, not necessity. Comfort. A new category of eating you almost forgot existed. But not everything about your old habits fades easily. For weeks, maybe months, you find yourself eating fast, hoarding small food items, slipping extra rolls into your coat pocket during dinners, just in case. You wake at night and reach for your canteen. Even in your dreams, you're still heating stew over a mess tin, and you're not alone. There's a whole generation of men and women who come back with this same quiet ache, this same shadow of hunger that lingers long after the stomach is full. At church suppers, people clean their plates with military precision. At family picnics, veterans instinctively scan the table for the highest calorie item and eat that first, a quirky note. Some returning soldiers insisted on keeping canned goods under their beds, spam, fruit cocktail, crackers, not because they needed them, but because it felt wrong not to have them nearby. Eventually it softens. Eventually, you learn to leave food on your plate. Eventually, you eat slowly again. But there's still a part of you, a quiet chamber in your mind where food is still a mission, where every bite is measured, not in flavour, but in necessity. And that part may never quite go away. Tonight, you sit with a plate of roast chicken, green beans, and warm rolls. A small candle flickers in the centre of the table. You're not at war anymore. But you still eat like you remember it. You find yourself older now, in a quiet neighbourhood where the loudest sound most days is the bark of a neighbour's dog or the drone of a lawnmower. You still get your groceries the old-fashioned way, walking to the market, basket in hand, nodding to familiar faces. But every time you walk past a shelf lined with brightly coloured snack cakes or microwave meals, your mind flickers back to tin cans, crumpled ration boxes, and the hard biscuits you used to tap on your helmet for good luck. You've been out of uniform for decades, yet you still eat like you expect a siren to go off mid-meal. Your grandchildren tease you about your taste in food, how you always keep canned meat in the pantry and stock up on powdered milk, just in case. You smile, but you don't explain. How do you tell them that the world once ran out of everything? That taste wasn't a luxury, it was a rumour. You sit at the table with them now, watching them push aside green beans and declare war on broccoli. You quietly finish your plate, every bite, every time. Not because you're hungry, but because waste still feels like a sin. Today's food culture is wild to you. Avocado toast, oat milk, turmeric lattes. You try them, politely. Some aren't bad. But when no one's looking, you still spread peanut butter on dry crackers and sip black coffee from a battered mug that saw 2 continents and a dozen camps. Historians still argue whether the culinary aftermath of World War II shaped the modern food industry. Some say yes, the demand for long shelf life items, for mass-produced meals, for instant gratification came straight from army rations. Others insist it was inevitable. But do you remember how instant coffee and canned meat didn't just survive the war? They followed you home. TV dinners born from the idea of a meal that could be made, served and eaten with military efficiency. Powdered eggs, once survival food, now part of factory bakeries and astronaut menus. Even freeze-dried fruit, a miracle in the jungle, is now sold to backpackers and dieters. And there's a strange kind of pride in that the food you once gagged on under a monsoon sky is now part of someone's curated lifestyle. You chuckle softly. Somewhere, someone is paying extra for a can of Spam with a retro label. If only they knew. A quirky tidbit. You once met a man at a veterans reunion who had saved an original K-ration box still sealed. He passed it around like a relic, and everyone took turns sniffing the cardboard. No one dared open it. It was a sacred fossil. Even now, at your age, food still anchors you. During storms, you instinctively fill pots with water, stack canned goods near the door, organise your pantry like a field depot. Old habits. War habits. No one taught you to stop. You keep a small notebook by your fridge, not for calories or recipes, but for inventory. You log what's running low, what's stocked up, and every so often, you catch yourself writing a note like more jam-needed moral boost. You smile. You don't cross it out. And when you're alone, really alone, you sometimes light a candle, sit with a hot bowl of stew, and eat in silence, slowly, gratefully, remembering every man who didn't get to. Because food isn't just food for you. It's memory, it's survival, it's ritual. And the war may be over, but the feast of remembrance never ends. You wake early now, not because you have to, but because your body still follows the rhythm of Reveille. You shuffle to the kitchen, start the coffee, and take a quiet inventory of your shelf just like always. A loaf of bread, a jar of peanut butter, a can of peaches that you'll probably never eat, but wouldn't dream of throwing away. Breakfast is simple. Toast, butter, black coffee. No frills. You sit in the morning stillness, the mug warm between your palms. Outside, birds chirp, lawn sprinklers tick. Inside, your mind hums with distant echoes, boots in the mud, the hiss of a can opening, the crunch of hard biscuits under a helmet's weight. It's been a lifetime since the war, but some things, some flavours never really leave you. You have friends now who've never seen a ration tin, never tasted powdered eggs or cold stew by moonlight. When they ask about the war, you smile softly. Tell a story or two. Maybe even the funny ones about trading your boots for chocolate, or the time your friend tried to make pudding out of hot sauce and mashed crackers. You never mention the hunger. Not really. Not the deep, rattling kind that shakes your bones and makes your dreams smell like bread. But it's there, and it shaped you. You volunteer now local shelter, food drives, soup kitchens, not out of charity, but out of understanding. You know what it means to stare down at an empty tray. You know the magic of a warm bowl passed into cold hands. You know that food, at its best, says you matter. Historians still argue whether wartime food taught the world to appreciate simplicity or merely to tolerate it? Whether it elevated the human spirit or exposed its breaking points, you think the answer is both. You remember the silent joy of canned peaches in a trench, the shared laughter over rock-hard biscuits, the sacred communion of coffee in a dented tin cup. Quirky detail sticks with you even now, the superstition some troops developed, that if you saved your fruit cocktail until the end, the mission would go well. It made no sense. But you still catch yourself doing it with your dessert sometimes, smiling at your own superstition. You lean back in your chair, sipping the last of your coffee. The sun climbs. Another peaceful day. You open a new jar of jam, and for no particular reason, you spread it generously. Maybe because you can, maybe because you earned it, maybe because sometimes food isn't just food, it's memory, it's survival, it's proof. You made it through. And as you lift your fork, take a bite, and let it sit warm on your tongue, you know this. Deep in your marrow, you never stopped being that soldier, ration in hand. But now, finally, the meal is your own. So here we are, full circle, belly full, mind softer. The war faded into stories and shadows. You're sitting in a quiet home, maybe a little older, maybe just wiser, with cabinets that no longer echo when you open them, and yet a part of you still listens for that tin can's hiss, still smiles when you smell something stewing slowly on the stove. Because food is more than survival, it's remembrance, and what you remember isn't always the taste, it's the company, the cold, the quiet laughter over meals that didn't deserve it. It's how every spoonful was shared. How even the worst tasting things became sacred when passed from hand to hand. So tonight, if you're lying in bed listening to the soft hum of your fan, let those memories curl around you like a warm blanket. Think of the men huddled over mess kits, the women stretching rations into something like dinner, the children chewing slowly on crusts of bread they knew not to waste. And if you're lucky enough to have eaten well today, really well, maybe whisper a small thank you. To those who cooked, those who waited, those who went without. Close your eyes. Let the lights dim in your mind. The mess tent quiets. The canteens clink softly in the distance. And somewhere, in a memory, someone passes you a spoon and says, "Eat, you'll feel better, because you will. And now, sleep